My toxic mother didn't disown me in private. She waited until my cousin's engagement dinner, raised her glass, and told 40 people I was dead to her. She said it calmly, like she was announcing dessert, while everyone stared at me like I'd committed a crime. She listed my betrayals, moving out, setting boundaries, choosing my own life, and painted herself as the grieving mother of a selfish daughter. The room believed her. They always did. What she didn't know was that I was done protecting her reputation. The announcement. The dinner was at a country club outside Dallas. White tablecloths, soft lighting, polite applause after every toast. My cousin and her fiancé were glowing at the head table. It was supposed to be their night. I almost didn't go, but my aunt begged me. "Don't make things worse," she'd said, as if I was the one causing the tension. My mother arrived late, dramatic, as always. She wore black, which I thought was strange for an engagement dinner, but she said it was elegant. When she hugged relatives, she held on to them a little too long. I could see her setting the stage, whispering, sighing, letting people ask what was wrong. I should have known something was coming. When she tapped her fork against her wine glass, the room quieted immediately. My father sat beside her, stiff and silent, like furniture. She looked fragile, shoulders slightly hunched, lips pressed tight. If you didn't know her, you'd think she was heartbroken. "I've been struggling with something," she began. Her voice trembled just enough. "As a mother, you do everything for your child. You sacrifice, you protect, and sometimes they still walk away." I felt the first pair of eyes turn toward me, then another, then all of them. She didn't use my name at first. She didn't need to. Everyone already knew. Over the last few months, she had been planting stories that I was distant, unstable, ungrateful, that therapy had changed me, that I had been influenced by people who didn't value family. "She's chosen a life that doesn't include us," my mother continued. "She's decided she no longer needs her family, and I can't force someone to love me." There it was, the performance, the victim script. My boyfriend, Ethan, squeezed my hand under the table. I could feel his anger building, but he stayed quiet. He knew this wasn't new. He had watched her call me 6 times in a row if I didn't answer. He had seen the guilt texts, the "after everything I've done for you" messages. Then she said it. "So for my own peace," she whispered, dabbing at dry eyes, "I have to accept that my daughter is dead to me." Gasps, actual gasps. One of my aunts reached for her hand. Someone muttered, "How tragic." My cousin looked frozen. Dead. Not estranged, not distant. Dead. I sat there, perfectly still, while 30 relatives judged me without asking a single question. No one asked what boundaries I set. No one asked why I'd stopped sharing details of my life. No one asked about the panic attacks I'd had after years of her control. Because my mother had always owned the narrative. Growing up in our suburban neighborhood outside Toronto, she was admired. Church volunteer, PTA leader, the woman who baked for every fundraiser. Online, she posted quotes about unconditional love. In real life, love came with contracts. If I succeeded without her involvement, she said I'd forgotten who helped me get there. If I failed, she said I proved her right. When I moved into my own apartment, she called relatives and told them I was going through a rebellious phase. When I started therapy, she said I was letting strangers turn me against my family. Control disguised as concern. 6 months before that dinner, I stopped giving her access to my bank account. I stopped letting her read my emails. I stopped apologizing for needing space. That's when the smear campaign started. By the time she stood up in that banquet hall, she had already rehearsed this moment in smaller rooms. This was just the grand finale. Finally, I stood up, slowly, calmly. She looked at me like she expected tears, like she expected me to beg. But I wasn't crying. I was thinking about the voice memo saved on my phone, the one she didn't know existed. And for the first time in my life, I realized something very clearly. If I was dead to her, I had nothing left to protect. When I stood up, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. My toxic mother expected tears. That was always her leverage. If I cried, she won. If I apologized, she rewrote history. If I stayed quiet, she controlled the ending. So I didn't cry. I looked at her, really looked at her, standing there in black, playing the grieving mother while her daughter sat 5 feet away, very much alive. "You're sure you want to do this?" I asked calmly. The room shifted. People weren't used to me speaking during one of her performances. She tilted her head, wounded. "I already have." Of course she had. She'd been building to this for months. What none of them knew was the smear campaign didn't start at that dinner. It started the day I opened my own checking account without her name on it. Growing up in our suburban New Jersey neighborhood, my mother handled everything for me. My college applications, my job interviews, my taxes. She insisted it was because she loved me, because she wanted to help. But help came with surveillance. She read my bank statements. She questioned every purchase. She asked why I needed new clothes when I already had enough. When I got my first promotion, she told relatives I'd only succeeded because she'd edited my resume. Ownership disguised as support. 6 months ago, I quietly removed her access to everything: my finances, my email, my medical portal. I stopped answering calls after 10 p.m. I stopped explaining every decision. That's when she started telling family I was unstable. "She's not herself lately," she'd whisper. "Therapy can change people." She framed independence as illness. When I started dating Ethan seriously, she escalated. She told my aunt he was controlling me. She told my cousin I was being manipulated. She told my grandmother I was losing my mind. And then, one night, after I refused to cancel a weekend trip because she felt lonely, she left me a voicemail, a long one. She didn't know I saved it. In it, she wasn't crying. She wasn't fragile. She was furious. "You think you can just walk away after everything I built for you? You don't get to leave and pretend I don't matter. If you cut me out, I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." It wasn't sadness, it was threat. Back in the banquet hall, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Not dramatically, not waving it around, just holding it. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice tight. "I'm tired," I said simply. "I'm tired of pretending this is grief when it's control." The room stiffened. My uncle shifted in his chair. My aunt frowned. Ethan stayed silent, watching me carefully. "You've told everyone I abandoned you, that I turned against my family, but you left out the part where you told me you'd destroy my reputation if I didn't obey you." Her face changed for the first time. It was subtle, but it was there. Fear. "Don't," she said quietly. I didn't press play. Not yet. Because this wasn't about humiliating her, it was about breaking the illusion. "You've spent months telling people I'm unstable, that I'm confused, that therapy made me disrespectful." I looked around the room. Has anyone asked why I started therapy? Silence. No one had, because she had always been the source of information, the narrator, the reliable one. I took a slow breath. I started therapy because I was having panic attacks every time my phone rang, because I was afraid to make decisions without permission, because I thought loving someone meant sacrificing my autonomy. My cousin looked stunned. My aunt opened her mouth slightly. My mother tried to interrupt. "This is inappropriate." "No," I cut in. "What's inappropriate is declaring your daughter dead because she asked for boundaries." The room felt smaller, hotter. I glanced down at my phone. My thumb hovered over the voice memo. If I pressed play, there would be no going back. But the most powerful thing in that moment wasn't the recording. It was the fact that I didn't need it. Because for the first time, she wasn't controlling the story. She wasn't the only voice in the room. And everyone could see that she wasn't grieving. She was losing control. She tried one last time. "I sacrificed everything for you. You wouldn't even have your job without me. You wouldn't have your apartment. You wouldn't have what?" I asked quietly. She stopped, because she knew. The truth wasn't that she built my life. The truth was that she built a system where I believed I couldn't survive without her, and I had just survived anyway. My father still hadn't spoken. He stared at the table, like he always did when things got uncomfortable. Passive loyalty, silent endorsement. I slipped my phone back into my purse. I don't need to play anything, I said calmly. If you think I'm dead to you, then stop calling, stop texting, stop telling people I owe you my existence. I met her eyes. And stop pretending you're the victim of the independence you raised me to fear. The room was silent, not sympathetic, not celebratory, just quiet. And in that quiet, something shifted. Because this time, she wasn't the fragile mother of a lost daughter. She was a woman being confronted in front of an audience she carefully curated. And she wasn't used to that. But what happened next wasn't what she expected. And it definitely wasn't what I expected either. The silence after I spoke felt heavier than anything she had said all night. For years, my toxic mother had mastered one thing better than anyone I knew: controlling the room. She could cry on cue. She could lower her voice at exactly the right moment. She knew which relatives were sentimental, which ones were judgmental, and which ones just followed the loudest voice. Tonight, for the first time, the room wasn't hers. She looked around, waiting for someone to defend her, waiting for an aunt to scold me, waiting for my father to step in and restore order. No one moved. That's when the mask cracked. "You see?" she snapped suddenly, her tone losing the softness. "This is what she does. She twists everything. She always has." There it was. Not grief, not heartbreak. Control slipping. My cousin, the one whose engagement dinner this was supposed to be, finally spoke. "Aunt Linda, did you really say you'd ruin her reputation?" My mother's head sharply turned. "That's not what I meant." But it was. My aunt frowned. "I told you you stopped speaking to her for no reason." My mother hesitated, because now she couldn't answer without admitting something. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just stood there calmly and said, "I stopped speaking to her because she threatened to show up at my office and tell my boss I was unstable." A few people inhaled sharply. My mother tried to laugh it off. "I would never," I said quietly, and I had the screenshot. I didn't need theatrics. I didn't need to play press on the voicemail. The shift had already happened. Once doubt enters a room, it doesn't leave quietly. For the first time, people weren't looking at me like I was heartless. They were looking at her like they were seeing something new. My father finally stood up, but not to defend me. He grabbed her arm gently and whispered, "Linda, let's go." He didn't argue with me. He didn't demand proof. He just wanted to remove her from the spotlight. That told everyone everything. She tried one last time. "You're destroying this family," she said through clenched teeth. "No," I replied evenly. "I'm just not protecting the lie anymore." And that was it. She walked out without another word. No dramatic tears, no fainting, no final speech. Just anger, raw and unfiltered, because her narrative had slipped. The dinner didn't resume the way people expected. Conversations were quieter. Stares were different. My aunt hugged me awkwardly. My cousin whispered, "I didn't know." Most of them didn't, because toxic parents don't act toxic in public. They curate. Ethan stood beside me the whole time. When we finally walked to the parking lot, he asked softly, "Are you okay?" I thought about it. For years, the idea of being dead to my mother would have shattered me. I would have begged, apologized, folded myself smaller to fit back into her approval. But standing there under the streetlights, I felt something unexpected. Relief. She thought disowning me would scare me back into obedience. Instead, she removed the last chain. Over the next week, things changed quickly. My aunt called to clarify a few things. My cousin texted asking for context. Even my grandmother, who rarely questioned anything, asked why my mother had said those things. The control was cracking, not because I exposed every secret, but because I stopped absorbing the blame. My mother hasn't called since that night, not because she forgave me, but because she knows I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. And the most humiliating thing for someone who lives off image is realizing their daughter no longer needs their approval to survive. She said I was dead to her. The truth is, that was the night I finally came back to life. If you've ever had a parent rewrite your story and turn you into the villain just to protect their image, I want to know. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have stayed silent or would you have done what I did? Like this video if you believe boundaries aren't betrayal, and subscribe if you're done letting toxic family control the narrative. There's more to this story, and trust me, it only gets deeper.